Hello and welcome everybody to this very special edition of the Credit Union Connection. I'm here with Henry Meier, who has been a long-term credit union attorney, including a long stint with the New York Credit Union Association. Welcome, Henry.
Hello, sir.
And so we're going to jump right into this. First, just give a little bit of a background on yourself.
Okay, Sal. I did prior to starting my own business a couple of years ago, my own firm. I was the general counsel and senior vice president at the New York Credit Union Association, where I dealt with a wide variety of issues, uh, both on an advocacy and legal level for credit unions. In the last 2 years, I've worked with both large and small credit unions, to give them the type of advice you would get from a general counsel, as well as help them anticipate the trends that might be impacting the industry down the road. So that includes everything from contract drafting to keeping them up to draft date on some of the legislation which might be impacting the credit union.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so speaking of things that impact credit unions, last night there was a huge announcement from the DoJ as well as the NCUA that Citadel Federal Credit Union was alleged to have been practicing redlining. Can you give us a little high level overview on this and the settlement and everything?
Okay, I would love to. The Citadel has agreed to a $6.5 million settlement with the Department of Justice to settle allegations that it has engaged in intentional redlining in violation of both the Fair Housing Act and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. Now, I should stress that Citadel does not concede any of the facts in the Department of Justice's complaint, but has agreed to take a series of steps, including opening up a branch in the area in Philadelphia. Okay, to address the one of the core allegations in the complaint, which was that the credit union intentionally took steps to avoid lending in the part of its community where the most minorities were located. By way of background, Citadel is a Pennsylvania-based $6 billion credit union, a community based in the Pennsylvania area. It has a field of membership that includes Philadelphia, the county of Philadelphia, as well as suburban uh, counties such as Bucks County and Lancaster.
Mm-hmm. And I want to go a little deeper into that, the redlining allegation. Um, so I'm going to read straight from the DOJ statement. It says, peer lenders generated mortgage applications in predominantly Black and Hispanic neighborhoods at nearly 3 times the rate of Citadel, and originated mortgage loans in those areas at more than 3 times the rate of Citadel. The complaint further alleges that Citadel's branches are located almost exclusively in majority white neighborhoods, with no branches in Philadelphia, which contains more than 75% of the majority Black and Hispanic neighborhoods and 34% of the total population of Citadel's market area. Now, I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, you are, but that seems really damning. What are your thoughts on that data?
It is just, those statistics are disturbing. What I would say is, and this is in no way a defense of the credit union. What I would stress is that first, um, we don't know. There's always another context with those statistics such as that, particularly in this area. Okay, but assuming that the statistics accurately reflect the situation, it does underscore the need for the credit union in all credit unions to do an ongoing job of monitoring what their fair lending statistics look like. And
Mhm.
in fact, one of the complaints issues raised in the complaint itself was that the credit union was reluctant to do fair lending analysis. And when it did it, and when it finally did get a third party in there to do the assessment, it knew long before this came that it had a fair lending problem.
Hmm.
in this area. So those statistics are disturbing, obviously. We don't know the full context, but that being said, at the very least, it appears that the credit union did not act aggressively in addressing some of the statistics it either should have been aware of or was aware of and chose not to not to act on. It also underscores another issue, which is the NCUA about 2017, 2018, I believe, in that timeframe, re, uh, went through a process where it redefined what is a well-defined local community. But in as part of the process, there was a lot of discussion of what is a credit union's obligation to go into the core of the core. In other words, they wanted credit unions to avoid, to the extent they can, um, avoiding poor areas such as Philadelphia, okay, and just skirting around the suburban areas. Now, there are very legitimate non-racial reasons, for non-discriminatory reasons for doing that. For instance, let's say you have a long plan of going into that core, but at this point it's more cost effective for you and you want to get your feet wet and going into the suburban area. So there are all reasons for doing it. But one of the basic takeaways that credit unions should anticipate as a result of the settlement is that it underscores the importance of understanding what you are committed to doing with FCUA when you agree to a charter expansion. Part of this complaint underscores that, according to DoJ, the credit union committed to opening three branches in the Philadelphia area, in Philadelphia. It chose not to almost immediately after we got the charter expansion. So that's one of the key things is understand that when you make a commitment to open up branches, and is that a realistic commitment, or are you being too aggressive in terms of your expansion plan? And um, take those commitments seriously, because you can bet that NCUA is going to be that much more stringent in making sure that credit unions follow up with those kind of commitments. And you're also going to you can also bet that NCUA is going to be looking much more closely at those credit unions that want to expand but avoid serving um, areas where you might have a lot of minority members. So the takeaway from all this is, one, be careful with the commitments you make, understand the commitments, and two, for credit unions going forward, uh, be realistic about what you can do and accomplish before going to NCUA and asking for these type of things.
Hmm. And so you kind of started to do that, but I'm going to ask, for if we can just concisely outline, say, the top three takeaways from this. You said something about, going through the process of the FOM enlargement and understanding the areas that you select. You,
Exactly. So
yeah.
that this all starts with the most basic aspect of all this is when you are a larger credit union, and let's say $1 billion up, and you have active mortgage lending that you participate in, it's absolutely crucial that you periodically examine what a examiner would find or a litigant would find if they wanted to assess whether or not you were committing potential fair housing violations. So first thing is, don't shy away from getting those third party assessments and doing it about once every 3 years. It's expensive, I get that, but to me, it's much better to know where you stand, even if the information is negative, than ignoring the warning signs. Two, uh, in terms of charter expansions, understand that, like I said, understand the commitments you're making. If you saying, okay, we're going to put a branch in there, okay, be be prepared to get
You're
that
putting
branch
a
in there.
branch up there.
Exactly. And and because one of the things I have seen, not so much on the for federal charter, but I have seen this, like well, I have seen on both the state and federal level, is that credit unions will aggressively seek charter expansions saying, okay, let's get this out of the way because we can have a plan for doing this at some point. On the other hand, you don't want it to be so aggressive that you can't possibly live up to the commitments you're making. So, second takeaway is be realistic about what you're asking for. And
Mhm.
then another key takeaway is you have to have not only the assessment of your fair lending, but you have to understand and have people employed by you who can understand and actually have the power to implement corrections where they see mistakes being made. Finally, and most importantly, this is not something that you can say, "Oh, gee, we have a branch there, therefore we're covered," or we look at the loans we made to this group of minorities. What they are looking for is a proactive effort on the part of any lender to ensure that it is reaching out to uh, minority groups within its community, and
Mhm.
that includes, for instance, do you have if you have, like, for instance, what Citadel was doing direct marketing precisely to people who weren't in that group. Okay,
Mhm.
so when you market, do you market to minority groups? When you open branches, are you opening branches in those areas? And what efforts are you making to proactively try to get um, applications generated from the group?
Mhm. And one of the things when I'm talking about like crisis communications, and this I think qualify as a crisis for the credit union, is the best defense is a good offense, which is
Yeah,
what you're saying, know what you're getting into, and also track, measure, audit what you're actually doing to make sure you can defend yourself in your decisions. Yeah, and
exactly.
to be
You
fair, Citadel put out a statement today, and they're saying they respectfully disagree with the allegations,
yeah,
and talk about how it was inadvertent, that they were the results, I guess, of what the DOJ found. So.
that's a key point in the press release. The use of the word inadvertent. What they're saying is that we don't really dispute the effect of what we've done, but what we're saying is we did not do this intentionally. What
Mhm.
is so, what is particularly striking about this allegation and this complaint is that the DOJ is accusing the credit union of intentional discrimination through
Mhm.
redlining. And that's a big time allegation. So they're not just saying that, okay, you were sloppy and you ended up um, with a fair lending profile, which indicates that you discriminate facially. What they're
Mhm.
saying is that you purposely went about doing things to avoid serving minority communities, and that really steps it up quite a bit. That's a serious allegation, and I
Mhm.
can see why a Citadel would be disputing that part of it.
Mhm. And also, Citadel has taken steps even before this announcement came out, because they've replaced their CEO and some of the senior management as well. So just want to make that point too, that they were, once this was coming about, they were making changes already before the settlement.
Yeah, which is always, of course, a good first step. The lessons for credit unions that might be wondering what they can learn from this is that just underscores, though, it would have been so much better if some of those steps could have been made 4 or 5 years ago, or
Mhm.
it would have saved everyone a lot of problems. It also underscores, frankly, the ongoing importance of your board of directors. I mean, we tend to there's a tendency to not um, emphasize the role that the board of directors has to play in these type of situations, and I think that's a risk that the industry faces as a whole. Okay,
Mhm.
what did the board of directors do to make sure that it was aware of the steps that the credit union was taking to comply with fair lending laws, fair housing laws, the Equal Credit Opportunity Act? That's a question that all boards should always be asking themselves. Okay, look at the products you offer, and then, well, how do we know that policies and procedures are not just being written but implemented in a way that complies with these laws? That's one of the key questions, and it's one of the key roles of and responsibilities of boards, not just to make sure the policies are written, but to see that they're being implemented on an ongoing basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm just going to plug you real quick because Henry has a great presentation on what board members really need to know about what they're getting themselves into. So I'll give you a quick plug there.
Thanks for that, Sarah. And but it is absolutely crucial that the board understand that. One of the things that has to be done under the settlement agreement here is that all the key officials, including the board, has to sign that they in fact are aware of what happened and that they are aware of the allegations and the steps that need to be taken to mediate them. So we would hope for most credit unions it wouldn't come to that point, but
Mm-hmm.
it does underscore um, the need not only for policy but to actually put that policy in place. Uh, you never want to be in a situation, and that's part of what happened here, where the plaintiff, in this case, the Department of Justice, can point out that you're engaging in conduct which contradicts your own policy, and
Mm-hmm.
that's you never want to see that.
And I imagine, even though, this has been settled, or assuming it's approved, it's been settled, um, there could still be a lot of private litigation coming out of this.
Yeah, I assume so.
Yeah.
We have to see um, uh, how quickly and what type of claims ultimately come out of that. But that's obviously one of the reasons why the credit union has to be extremely cautious in what it says at this point as well.
Mm-hmm. And again, this is just an allegation, but as you mentioned, the NCUA a few years back started turning the wheels more, turning the dial up on consumer protection and fair lending type issues. So what are the legal and the political implications that credit unions should be aware of?
This is a classic example of how you have to be aware of both the legal and policy realities, which is that this is taking place against the backdrop of a real decisive turn in the tone of NCUA oversight, in which Chairman Harper has openly said that it is a myth that sometimes boards are looking out for the best efforts of their interests of their members, and that is NCUA's job to step in and fill that void. Now you can agree or disagree with that premise, but if I was Chairman Harper, this would be example 1A to make that argument.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I think what's interesting, you're the communications person, Sarah, but Chairman Harper's extensive press release in which he comments on this proposal is prominently displayed front and center on NCUA's website this morning.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, I'm not sure we would have seen it given that much attention, or so he's clearly justifiably pointing to this as um, part of a larger effort that NCUA is taking to work closely with DoJ and
Mm-hmm.
identify discriminatory practice. So I think that in itself says a lot about the political environment in which credit unions are going to find themselves. I think it also underscores the need for, as I said, from a legal standpoint, really be able to explain if you're going to avoid or not expand into neighboring majority minority areas. There are perfectly legitimate reasons for doing that, but you better be able to demonstrate um, what the legal and non-discriminatory reasons are for doing that.
Mm-hmm. And so with that fair lending emphasis, what role will the election, the federal election coming up next month, what role is that going to play?
It could have a very important one. This is all part of this is I forget the numbers, but in the press release they mentioned that this is the 14th action the NCUA has taken under its redlining initiative. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so you have a Justice Department which since 2021 has really examined the issue of redlining and taken steps not only against credit unions, a credit union now I should say, but
Right.
also has prominently displayed that it's taken its first action against a non-depository lender. So, so this is a initiative by the NCUA, excuse me, by the DOJ. And if you look at the other settlements, they're very they're very consistent. They all ask for not so much a youth penalty, but they ask for um, basically the fund to help offset the cost of loan applications in the lending process. They ask for more scrutiny of by compliance states. So this itself is pretty consistent with what the DOJ has done, and it is a fairly sharp turn towards redlining. Now that tells me that if we get a new DOJ in there, okay, under President Trump, I don't think you would have the same. We can assume that you may not have the same emphasis, but who knows? But I would strongly suggest that you don't have as strong an emphasis placed on redlining in this initiative. But one important thing to keep in mind: NCUA has signaled that it is going to continue, that it is putting a greater emphasis on these issues, consumer compliance in general and fair lending. I think it's fair to say as well. So
Mhm.
in those, then that increased emphasis will continue. We're going to have the two Democrats on the board for a while. And so you're going to see these increased emphasis if 3 years to come.
Yeah, yeah, because NCUA seems to be the last of the agencies where they start replacing the board members after um, their terms end when the next party comes in. A lot
And
of
not
board
only that,
members are hang on.
Kyle is the lone Republican left now.
Mhm.
He's the one whose term ends the soonest. So
Right.
the next replacement a uh, will be a Republican, but that majority you now have with the chairman and board member Suga is going to be in place for at least 2 or 3 more years, I think.
Mm-hmm. And so inside the credit union, I feel like this probably emphasizes the importance of having a compliance officer, having, a chain of command specific to that, to compliance.
Yeah, it does. I don't want to mischaracterize what this situation was at
Mhm.
this credit union. It's not entirely clear to me the way the complaints worded, though, that that they that they either had a compliance person, and if they did, what oversight that person exercised over fair lending.
Mhm.
So it does underscore, if you think you're saving money by cutting back on compliance, you're not. It's penny wise and pound foolish. If you are get to a certain size where you're doing a lot of lending and you could be susceptible to this type of thing, you need to make sure you have staff that has expertise specifically in this area. So that's all part of it. But then, um, even if you're a small credit union and you don't think this is going to impact you, but it won't impact you directly. Okay, it does underscore the need to have the resources to show you are in compliance with the most important regulations. And there's nothing more basic um, than demonstrating that you actively uh, that you don't discriminate, and not only that you don't discriminate, but what steps you are taking to make sure that everyone is welcomed at your credit union, regardless of their skin color, that kind of thing. So
Mhm.
that's one of the big takeaways. Now, I'm concerned though that with so much emphasis placed on risk management, which is a fine paradigm, and credit unions should use it, but let's be reasonable. Okay, you don't say, okay, well, what are the odds that I'm going to be subject to a fair lending audit? Therefore, I don't really have to put much money into this. There are some things I would argue that you have to make a commitment to, just because it goes to the nature of who you are and what we are as an industry. That's where I and that's where I think the emphasis has to be from a
Yeah.
compliance and legal standpoint.
credit unions are all about financial inclusion. I mean, that's why
Exactly.
they exist. So, well, Henry, you're an old pro at this because you've been on with me before. As you know, I always give my guests the final thought, final words. What do you have to say to our credit union audience?
So one thing we didn't get to that I think is worth addressing is the potential political ramifications. Okay, there have been an effort. There has been efforts for years now to argue, for instance, that credit unions should be subject to the CRA. Okay, they were, I believe, Illinois and Massachusetts has had it for more than a generation. There are state law. This is it's going to be interesting to see for me to say if this adds momentum to that call because
Mhm.
the industry's basic argument has always been we don't need to have those kind of restrictions because or those kind of requirements because it's in who we are. Okay.
Mhm.
And like I said, we don't know the facts of this case, but based on if the facts as alleged by DOJ are accurate, this doesn't help that argument.
Mhm.
So how are we as an industry ready to respond to in the event that concerns are raised and arguments are made based on this occurrence? I would argue that um, it's an outlier of a situation that uh, as part of the as part of the community expansion, we do emphasize an emphasis on uh, fair lending and making sure we don't put ourselves in a position where we could be engaging in activity that could be perceived as discriminatory. That being said, I would hope and think that there will be some um, ramifications in terms of what we have to answer for based on this activity. Now, I tend to say those things, and I'm always surprised by what blows away in the legislative process and doesn't have any impact, and then the issues that do. So that prediction, if you will, could end up being dead wrong. We have to see what
Mhm.
happens.
Yeah. And so, Henry, thank you so much for your time and expertise today. Appreciate it. And you have a great rest of your day.
Thank you very much, and you have a great weekend as well.